This is a 2000 Ferrari 550 Maranello, and I love everything about it. V12 power, gated 6-speed manual transmission, absolutely gorgeous design, and it's rare even by supercar standards. Today, I'm going to review this fantastic 550 and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, big news, this 550 Maranello is currently for sale and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This 550 is a great one because it's a driver car with some miles, meaning you can actually use it. You don't have to park it in some sealed bubble in your garage to preserve it forever. It also has a rare interior color and some custom options, and you can buy it on Cars and Bids. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this 550 Maranello, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. All right, time for the quirks and features of the 550 Maranello, one of my very favorite modern Ferraris. Let's start with exactly what this car is. It's Ferrari's two-seater V12 model, which was historically always a car that Ferrari had offered in its lineup going back for decades. But for the 25 years before the 550 came out, Ferrari's two-seater V12 had the engine in the middle, behind the interior, with the Ferrari Boxer in the 70s and then the Testarossa in the 80s and early 90s. The 550 came out in the late 90s and brought the engine back to the front. So you had a front-engine V12 two-seater Ferrari returning to the lineup for the first time since the Daytona in the late 60s and early 70s. And the V12 was absolutely exquisite. A 5.5-liter V12, hence this car's name, the 550, and it had about 480 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque. And it's just a gorgeous engine. It's huge, it looks cool with the prancing Ferrari horse front and center on the top. That's part of the reason this car is so special, this amazing V12 power plant, and as you can imagine, it sounds pretty good too. Take a listen. And in terms of the powertrain, the other important thing this car had right here, a gated 6-speed manual transmission. Now, that's a big deal, a 6-speed manual to change gears in a V12, but it's especially a big deal in this car because this was the last V12 Ferrari that only came with a manual. All future Ferrari V12s were either offered only with an automatic or almost completely with an automatic, like 95% were sold with an automatic. But this, the 550, was only available with 3 pedals and a gated manual, and it was the last V12 Ferrari that was like that. This car is also absolutely beautiful, a fantastically gorgeous design, not necessarily traditional fast-looking sports car Ferrari, but instead elegant and restrained while still being sporty and exciting. I'll talk more about the design later, but that definitely contributes to why I like this car so much and why a lot of other enthusiasts do. And then there's the rarity factor. Even for a Ferrari sports car, supercar, this is rare. Ferrari made only 3,083 550 Maranello models like this one, plus another 448 units of the 550 Barchetta, which was the open roof version. I say open roof because it wasn't actually a convertible. They sold it with no roof at all, which kind of limited the practicality. So about 3,500 total between the two versions. That's exceptionally rare. That makes this car about as common as the Mercedes-Benz Benz 300 SL, which is a beloved sports car, sells for well over $1 million now. And this car is rarer than the 05 Ford GT, which I own and love, but this car is a little bit more special from a production numbers point of view. But in spite of all of its wonderful attributes, the 550 certainly had some interesting quirks and features that made it a little bit odd, which was common to Ferrari models from this era. They always stood out a little bit it with some strange choices. And in this car, we start with simply getting inside. This is the key fob. It has just one button, which both locks and unlocks the doors. If they're unlocked, you press the button, they're locked. If they're locked, you press the button and they unlock. The weird thing about the key fob is you get inside after unlocking the doors and you have a certain amount of time in order to start the car. If you don't start the car quickly enough, this little red light starts flashing and then you turn the key and nothing happens. That's by design. It was an immobilizer that was fitted to the 550 and the Ferrari 360 from this era as well. And basically the thinking was once you unlock the doors, you had to get in and start the car right away, or else it wouldn't let you start the car for fear that maybe you were stealing it. It doesn't make a lot of sense, which is why no other cars had it, but the 360 and the 550 did. So if you get inside the car and you don't start it right away and the immobilizer turns on, you got to get the key back out and press the unlock button again in order to turn off the immobilizer. Certainly an interesting quirk. And the quirks continue with the climate controls. You see a fairly standard group of climate controls, except one button is marked stop. If you press that, nothing of importance happens. If you actually want to turn off the climate controls, you turn this dial to 0 and then they're off, which is how most climate controls work. So why is there an extra stop button? I have no idea. And speaking of interesting controls, I also like the fact that this car has a sport button. It is a gated V12 manual Ferrari, and yet you can put it in sport mode. Isn't the whole car a sport mode? Isn't that why you choose to drive this car? Well, apparently not. You have a sport button. And another unusual control, this stereo, as you can see. You go to turn it on, you press the on button, and the word Ferrari comes on screen, the least convincing display of any manufacturer's name ever. It doesn't even attempt to mimic the Ferrari font. It just says Ferrari as simply as possible. But anyway, this is the radio. It works pretty simply. These radios were actually stock units that were in a lot of different vehicles, not just Ferraris in this era. But when you want to turn off the stereo, what do you press? Well, the on button, of course, because anything else wouldn't make sense. And another unusual item in this car, the horn. You activate the horn with these little buttons on the side of the steering wheel. You press it and, well, take a listen to the unusual horn. That horn sound was actually characteristic of Ferrari and other Italian cars from this era, and so was the unusual parking brake, which is mounted on the floor between the driver's seat and the driver's door. An odd place for a parking brake, but even stranger is its operation. If you want to turn on the parking brake, you pull it up, and it's on, and then you can push it down, and that way it's not blocking you from getting in and out of the car. If you then want to turn off the parking brake, you pull it up again, and then you press the button and push it down, therefore turning it off. Seems a little counterintuitive, but that's how it works. It was called a flyaway parking brake, and several Ferrari and other exotic car models had that in this era. Now, one other interesting feature in this particular 550, you can see in the center here, there's a plaque that has the Ferrari horse logo on it, and then a name, a scribbled name. Looks like maybe it says Joe Williamson. I don't know what it says, but that came from the factory, believe it or not. It was a factory option, and frankly, a rather cool personalization touch to get your signature imprinted on a plaque in the middle of your personally designed Ferrari with the Ferrari logo on it. And speaking of custom touches in this car, the interior is certainly that. You can see the seats are this brown, a very rich brown color, which is certainly unusual in these cars, and that's carried over to the lower part of the dashboard, as you can see, and the door panel, sort of a dark, not tan at all, but definitely a rich, darker brown color, which frankly looks pretty good. Now, the interesting thing here is the contrast color is a light gray, as you can see on the upper part of the dashboard and the steering wheel, and you have that same brown and gray contrast on the ceiling. You can see the headliner is mostly done in this darker brown, but some of it is in the lighter gray color. Most Ferrari interiors from this era were either black or beige tan, but this one is certainly custom and certainly special, which makes this car stand out a little more from the already rare 550 Maranello. Now, as far as displays in this car, a couple of interesting ones worth noting. One is the gauge cluster, which, as you can see, is a very straightforward and simple affair with very large print font. They're not taking any liberties trying to make it look cool or special. It's all just basic and easy to read and easy to understand, which makes sense when you're going 180 miles an hour. You don't want to have to try to figure out what's going on. It's all simple and basic in there. One thing I do love in the gauge cluster, though, this little screen shows a top-down image of a 550 when you have a door open, showing you which door is open. And it's actually a pretty faithful representation of a 550, even though it uses about 7 pixels to display it. It's pretty cool and a nice little touch. One other display I love here in this car, in the center, the ashtray lid shows 2 flags. That would be Ferrari's flag and Pininfarina's flag. Ferrari, of course, the manufacturer. Pininfarina was the designer of this car and many other Ferrari models in this era, until a few years later, Ferrari decided to fire Pininfarina and go in-house with their design. So you see this flag joining the 2 brands. Little did we know that merely a few years later, they would split apart and these flags would be no more. Now, in the 90s, Ferrari offered 2 different regular production V12 cars, the 550 and the 456. And the big difference between the two was back seats. The 456 had back seats. The 550 was strictly a 2-seater. But there's a lot of space behind the seats. As you can see, a large carpeted parcel shelf here with these leather straps finished in the same rich brown color as the rest of the interior. You could get a decent amount of storage, luggage, whatever you want, behind the front seats. Even though you don't have extra seats back there, you do have a fairly practical interior where you can put the nice amount of luggage. And in case you wanted more storage space, the 550 provides it in the form of a fairly large trunk. But before I show you that, let's talk about getting into the trunk, which is, in characteristic Ferrari fashion, rather difficult. The button on the key fob to open it up, no, doesn't exist. A keyhole in the back where you stick the key, twist it, and then it opens. No, that also doesn't exist. To open the trunk in this car, you have to open the door, reach inside to the center console, and then flip this little switch in the middle, the trunk switch, and only then can you pop the trunk open. Then you gotta walk all the way out to the back of the car and open it up the rest of the way, where again you reveal a fairly sizable trunk. It's not huge, but it's surprisingly large for a limited production Ferrari supercar, sports car like this. It's a fairly practical vehicle considering this and the parcel shelf. Now, you will notice inside this trunk there are a couple of leathered items in there. What exactly is going on? Well, there's 2. One is a leather, it looks like a briefcase, and if you open it up, you have a full toolkit in here. A lot of Ferrari models have a toolkit. This one is unusually extensive. It has wrenches with the Ferrari logo. It has screwdrivers with the Ferrari logo, plus belts and bulbs and fuses all in this toolkit in case you want to work on your 550 by the side of the road if you have an issue. Now, the other leather pouch is actually even more interesting. You open that up and it contains, well, all the car's books, the owner's manual, service documentation, etc. But you also have a Ferrari branded flashlight in here, as you can see, and you have this car's original window sticker. So let's talk window sticker for a second. I'm holding it now and you can see the original sticker price of this car was $219,000, and that included a $7,700 gas guzzler tax, which actually makes sense because the fuel economy listed for this car, 13 miles per gallon on the highway, 8 miles per gallon in the city. Needless to say, it wasn't particularly efficient. The thing that I am struck by, though, looking at this car's window sticker, is the relatively affordable options pricing that it has. That little plaque that I showed you in the center console with the signature and the Ferrari logo cost a mere $294. That was it. That's all Ferrari charged you to get your signature emblazoned in a plaque in the center. These days, Ferrari would probably charge $10,000 for that. They've been known to charge $3,000 for heated seats, $8,000 for Apple CarPlay. $294 for that plaque is a total deal. And it continues. Special colored piping, probably this gray piping on the seats, as you can see. It looks very nice and matches matches other parts of the interior, that cost only $566. The steering wheel in this light gray to match other parts of the interior, only $308. Total bargain pricing compared to what Ferrari charges now, where you can have a base price of a car be $250 grand and easily spend $150,000 in options. This car only has about $8,000 in options, which is unheard of in a modern Ferrari, but it was fairly common in this period. You just didn't have as much personalization, and you didn't have as many options with Ferrari trying to get every last cent out of the customer. Very interesting to see this older window sticker for this car. Now, and next up, since we're talking about the trunk, one very interesting aspect of the 550 is notable back here. If you close the trunk, you can see this little cutout in the bumper. Not all that unusual. You stick your hand under there and open the trunk. It makes sense. But it is a very important detail of this car because after the 550 Maranello came out, Ferrari evolved the car to create the 575 in 2002. That car looked basically identical to the 550 with only a couple of small differences, and this line in the bumper is one of them. All the 550 Maranello models have this little cutout in the bumper for your hands, but none of the Ferrari 575s do. So if you're looking at the car from the back, the only way you can tell apart a 550 and a 575 is this little bumper cutout. There's some knowledge that will impress your friends at Cars and Coffee. Now, the other way to tell apart a 550 and a 575 is up front, where it's a lot more obvious. The 575 has sort of a regular oval-shaped grille in front. The 550 has more of a smile. That's what everybody always called it. The 550 is smiling. The 575 just has an open mouth. Other than that, the two cars are largely the same on the outside. The wheels were different, but of course that's pretty easily interchangeable. There were some other very subtle differences, but I've just told you the two biggest. Plus, the 575 had a little more power and they were almost all automatic transmission. And that makes the 550 more desirable than its later evolved, newer, more powerful version just because all of these had the gated 6-speed manual. But 550 or 575, doesn't matter which, this car is absolutely beautiful. The design is truly fantastic. And I think it does a great job of combining elegant and gorgeous and beauty with high performance and fast and cool. Maybe better than any other car. You see a lot of fast, crazy looking cars like the Countach and a lot of very beautiful cars, but they never really look that cool and exciting. Well, this does a great job of being both. And my take on the 550 is that I think it's a modern day version of the Ferrari Daytona, which was Ferrari's famous V12 front engine car in the late 60s. That vehicle is now worth $600,000, up above $1 million for certain versions. And I think the 550 could absolutely have that trajectory over the next several decades simply because it has the same formula. A beautiful, elegant, fast, exciting car with V12 power and a gated manual transmission. And as we know, Ferrari's not making any more cars with that formula anymore. It's just this. This is what you had, this is what you get, and it's fantastic to look at, to talk about, amazing on paper, and I am so excited to take this car out for a drive. And so now, let's do it. All right, driving the 550 Maranello, and I gotta say, I love the 550 Maranello, and I especially like this one. Everybody who knows me knows I have a thing for driver cars, and this is a driver car. 50,000 miles on this car. You do not have to worry about it or baby it. It's never going to be an investment grade collectible in a bubble. This is a car you can drive guilt-free. The value difference between one of these cars with 50,000 miles and one of these cars with 60,000 miles is essentially zero. So you can drive it and you can enjoy it, and it is so damn enjoyable. I absolutely love how this car looks. I love its beauty and yet subtlety. The combination of the two is fantastic. I love a gated 6-speed manual, but especially in a V12. How perfect is that? Rolling your own gears in a 12-cylinder car is one of life's great joys, especially when it sounds and feels like this car does. Ken drove one of these and he said that he didn't think the suspension was up to the task of like a true sports car. And my view is that's never been what this car is about. To me, the 550 has always been a cruiser. You put your foot down and you just go, and it can eat miles at high speed. And I think that's one of the coolest things. This car is more about comfort and luxury and leather and just brute force power, yet delivered in kind of an elegant way. And I don't think there's ever been a car that's ever been made that is both so elegant and so subtle. It's just absolutely perfect at doing both of those things. Oh man, the power. The just brute force power of this car is so fantastic, and yet it doesn't come on in a brute force way, like in a Corvette, for example. It comes on in this beautiful V12 sound, which is just so absolutely perfect. Easy to rev match downshift. The clutch is very easy to operate. The shifter is very easy to operate. Now, I admit that the handling in this car is a little not perfect. There's a little bit of roll in the suspension. There's a little bit more play in the steering than you might expect. There's a little imprecision on center. And even as you get into turns, you can feel the weight of the car. It's heavier and sort of a floatier suspension. But this car is over 25 years old, or it's exactly 25 years old, and it's just not built for, fast, high-speed cornering. And back then, you kind of had to choose in the 90s. They didn't have these incredible suspension tricks that they have now, where a car can be both things with the press of a button. And this car, they decided to focus more on luxury, since they had the 355, the 360, and later the 430 to be like the sports cars of the range. I have said many, many times over the last couple of months that I am done buying cars. I love the cars I have. I love my group of cars. But if I were to get one more car, just one more car, if it wasn't an F40, which cost $2 million, it would be a 550. I am missing a Ferrari in my stable of cars. And when I look at the Ferrari world right now, the one that appeals to me the most is this one. It is beautiful, it is fast, it is cool, it is undoubtedly gaining value and excitement and appreciation among enthusiasts, even in a market, a general car market, where that is not happening to very many cars. This is one of the few that is clearly on the upswing, and deservedly so. It's also relatively reliable as these things go. Hey, this one's covered 50,000 miles. This car is just exceptionally special in every way. And I really do feel like it's the modern day interpretation of the Ferrari Daytona in a way that basically no other Ferrari has been before or since. After the Daytona, they went mid-engine. Those cars were very different beasts. And then after this, they went automatic. And those cars have been very fast, but it's not really the same. This car is so much fun. And it does steer and handle quite well. The steering is lighter than you'd want. The handling's actually pretty good. I said it was floaty, and that's in comparison to like a 430. But it still feels like a sports car. Oh, listen to that thing howl at 7,000. This is the car. Why do I not have one of these? Oh, this is beauty. This is perfection personified. This car feels like a bargain considering what it is. It is just such a special and exciting car. And I can't stress enough how much I absolutely adore everything about it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. God, this thing is cool. It is an exceptional car. Just a truly fantastic and exceptional and beautiful and elegant and subtle and fast and high-speed cruising and wonderful car. And I just can't say enough good things about this car and about what I think its potential is for the future in terms of value appreciation. And driving this car, as I thought it might, kind of makes me want to buy one. It's just lovely. And so that's the Ferrari 550 Maranello. This car has it all. V12 power, a gated manual transmission, beautiful styling, and this one has some miles on it, so you can actually use it and enjoy it, and you can buy it on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give the 550 a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 63 out of 100, which puts the 550 Maranello here against relevant cars. It performs admirably, beating out most vehicles from its era, like the BMW Z8, Bentley Continental GT, and Lamborghini Diablo 6.0. And frankly, it deserves the strong accolade given its gorgeous styling, gated manual transmission, V12 power, and swelling enthusiast interest and price point. My only complaints about the 550 Maranello are its over-assisted steering and its sometimes potentially temperamental reliability, but the overall package is exceptional and it's easy to overlook those minor flaws for this excellent car.